Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off the Dome Sports Podcast, your favorite sports podcast where two sports lovers can give their hot takes. Off the dome. I'm Redfish.
I'm ReBo Hustle.
And today we are coming at you with a very special 7-round mock draft with our New Orleans Saints. ReBo, how we doing?
Doing good. Excited to get into draft season. We've already started it a little bit, but excited to get just in our hometown team in the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, we've already done 3 mock drafts already. 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 already up on the channel if you want to check those out. Off the Dome Sports Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can also check us out on X, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, off the _dome pod, as well as check out The Know, KNEAUX, the only way to spell it. Check out at Be in the Know on X and Instagram and YouTube and even the website. I mean, just in the past couple weeks, we've put out like 4 interviews of content, tons of Pell stuff, LSU stuff. I was able to talk to LSU women's coach Gary Redis, able to talk to Greg Clayton Jr., ReBo Hustle, and Mustang were able to talk to former LSU basketball star Tyrus Thomas. So lots of fun stuff going on the network channel. Make sure to check that out if you enjoy this content, which we know you will. But without further ado, let's get right into this 7-round mock draft for the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, our first pick is at 14, and a lot of people talk tackle, and that's kind of the way we went with it. First pick on the board, Olu Fashanu is who we went with the first pick. Reese, you're our offensive lineman guy. Go ahead and cover why you like Olu.
Yeah, Fashanu, however you want to say it, according to him. He doesn't care. He's probably the highest ceiling offensive tackle in this draft, guy that really was at the tops of draft boards to start this draft season, but the production this year, I believe he got hurt maybe.
Yep.
All of that was down and kind of is having him fall to the 14, maybe even further into the first round side of things. But the guy is like an ideal specimen, can play right and left, is I believe 6'6", 320, which you can't build a more perfect offensive lineman, in my opinion. But yeah, there's not many flaws to his game. He's still a little raw, still can learn a lot from an amazing offensive line coach and room that we have. And yeah, I mean, you have to go tackle, you have to go wide receiver in the first 2 rounds here, at least in my opinion, and you answered the bell.
Yeah, I think if you look at Fashanu, like you said, doesn't matter how you say it. Either way, he's a really good player. He ranks anywhere from like the 2nd to the 4th tackle in the class, which that sounds like a big range, but when you look at the other guys on the board like J.C. Latham, Talise Fuaga, guys who could go around the 14th pick with us as well, I think he fits right in there with the bunch, and you can rank him anywhere from 1st to 3rd on that list of guys. And it's debatable because they're all really good players, but they all have their certain niches. For me, I think, like you mentioned, he's a big guy, 6'6", 320, but also very athletic and a mover at that size. And for me, the biggest point was he has experience against high-level talent. You can see in this picture right here, he's playing against Michigan. He played in the Big Ten, so he played against really good defensive linemen. He's used to playing at a high level, playing against high-level recruits, and for him to be solidified as a first-round talent, even with having, that recency bias against him because he got injured, and guys like Fuaga had a huge Senior Bowl, and Fautanu has been showing up in the Combine, one of my personal favorites. I think it's really important for us to address our needs for the Saints, and the biggest need right now is offensive tackle, whether it be left or right. You need somebody who can cover one of those sides of the line, and if Fashanu falls to us at 14, that is an opportunity you cannot pass up.
Yeah, and other guys to watch at this 14 spot, J.C. Latham, he's more of a right tackle only guy. Played, I believe, all 4 years for Alabama. Then Talise Fuaga, guy who came on later on in the season, my right tackle 2 in this draft, but also tackle 4. Was a monster at the Senior Bowl. A guy you cannot get enough of, who's physical at the point of attack and will finish blocks. And Graham Barton, your guy, would you like to speak on him?
Yeah, I think the reason I like Barton so much is because of how versatile he is. He played a mostly left tackle over at Duke, but he's a guy who projects to move into the inside, similar to Elijah Vera Tucker from a few years ago who ends up going to the Jets. He went around this same range. I think Vera Tucker went somewhere around the 11th to 12th pick and ended up being a really, really good player. So I like Graham Barton as well out of Duke. A little bit shorter arms. That's why he projects to go to the inside, but he's very athletic on his feet. But, if we're saying all four of those guys are on the board, is Fashanu my number one pick out of those four guys? Maybe not. But realistically, they have a lot of tackle-heavy, needy teams in this top 13. So for us at 14, I think we pick best tackle available. And if Fashanu falls to us, I'll be happy on draft night.
Absolutely.
So, obviously, our next pick would be at 45, but we project a trade here. With the way the board fell in the mock draft that we did, we thought we could gather some extra value. So instead of picking at 45, just move back a few spots and trade 2 of the 4 fifth-rounders that we had while moving up to pick 120, which will get us 40 to 50 spots higher than those other 2 picks we had, and picking up a next year's pick as well. For a team that really needs some depth and a team that needs some help for the future, I think picking up some future picks as well as moving up later in the draft would really help us. So, that being said, that target we get at 53, Xavier Legette. You are a huge Xavier Legette guy. Give me the rundown on the South Carolina product.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it how you brought it up to me earlier on him being this DK Metcalf athletic freak. But he's a big outside receiver, kind of wide receiver I like, goes up, gets the ball. Saints don't have one, and so that's why we were really looking between him and Keon Coleman, just a different type of receiver than Olave and Shaheed, and a guy who had crazy production this year. He didn't do much in his first 2 years at South Carolina, but, man, did he come on hot this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were looking at it earlier. He had 200 yards total over the past 2 seasons, but then this season comes out and just blows it up as an athletic freak on that South Carolina team. You can see there, SEC graduate, captain's patch. So he has that experience, and the people in the locker room obviously loved him. Very different receiver from Olave and Shaheed. Olave, more of that route runner, smooth guy. Shaheed, deep threat, and Legette would kind of be fill the Michael Thomas role where he's that physical 50-50 ball while also being able to stretch the field. Like you mentioned, other players to watch. Keon Coleman is one of them. Fills that same role, but I don't think he has the upside that Legette does because he doesn't have that athleticism. He's a slower, while he's a little bit of a bigger body red zone threat, he doesn't quite have the athleticism that Xavier Legette has, so he doesn't have the upside, in my opinion.
Not as clean of a route runner.
Right. Legette, while being a bigger guy, can also run routes. Another wide receiver, Jermaine Burton, he is the definition of a deep threat. He stretches the field very well. I just thought he maybe doesn't fit this team as well because he's a Rashid Shaheed-esque player. And then you could always look on the defensive side as well. Chris Braswell was the highest rated defensive player left on the board out of Alabama as well. Edge rusher, played opposite Dallas Turner and still had plenty of production. So when you're playing opposite of a first-round NFL product and you can still make your mark on a defense, especially one in the SEC, that's a guy you have to look at. And then Jatavian Sanders as well, tight end out of Texas.
Yeah, one of the few tight ends in this draft that I would even think about taking. I know last year was tight end heavy. This year they're more smaller pass-blocking tight ends later in the draft, whereas the first 2-3 rounds you get guys like Jatavian Sanders and Brock Bowers who can do it all.
Yeah. Moving on from pick 53, we move down to pick 120. So a big gap here, but picking up one of Rebo Hustle's favorite players. I mean, these first 3 picks all seem like you picks, but we'll get to some me guys in a minute.
Yeah, Trevor Keegan, I fell in love with him during the college football playoff this year. Super technically sound. Of course, you see him in a Michigan Wolverine jersey, winning pedigree. But my favorite thing is he plays through the whistle. This guy will go find somebody until the whistle blows. So I pulled up his NFL draft report, and even scouts are noticing his ability to play through the whistle and his ability to find guys even on the second and third level.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of your love originally came from the uniform that he wears with the number that he wears on it, reminiscent of Bussin' with the Boys character, Taylor Lewan. But if you're aiming to be like a player, Taylor Lewan is not a bad one to be like. Absolute lockdown left tackle on the Titans O-line for quite some time. Obviously not in the league anymore, but if Trevor Keegan can bring anything that Taylor Lewan brought to that Titans offense to the Saints offense, I am 100% in. Like you said, very technically sound. I love him because he's a national champion. I think when you win in college, you just bring something different to the league. I mean, I know we're looking at big programs here, but if you look at Georgia and Bama and Ohio State and LSU, those are teams that perennially...
Those are teams. Start there.
Mm-hmm. Those are teams that perennially win at the college level, and then they also have the most players in the NFL. So correlation equals causation to me on that one. So you get a national champion in the Saints locker room with a lot of players who haven't won. I really like Trevor Keegan there as well.
Yeah, and at some point later in the draft, we're going to have to address another spot in the O-line, whether it be a tackle or a guard. I think Trevor Keegan can play all three interior positions, and if you have to, he might be able to swing a tackle. But just a guy with a nasty streak who is both run and pass block sound.
Other players to watch here, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. He's one of the highest-ranked interior offensive linemen. So if he falls to pick 120, you have to give a look at him. I don't know too much about him, not as much as I know about Trevor Keegan, but he's a higher-rated prospect based on not only other mock drafts, but on draft profiles and NFL.com and such. Malik Washington, wide receiver out of UVA. He was a award finalist along with Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr. So to be mentioned in those same breaths and also be there over 100 picks into the NFL draft, teams are going to be giving you a look. And then for me, something we're going to talk about in just a minute is the addition of a running back. At around this pick, we saw guys like Will Shipley and Braylon Allen go off the board. If they would have been available at 120 in the mock draft we did, I would have banged the table against ReBo Hustle here to add one of those guys. I'm a big Braylon Allen fan. He's built like a linebacker, but plays the running back position as well as anybody in college football. Had a lot of production and went to a school that's known for producing running backs. So I love Braylon Allen. And then Will Shipley, great pass catcher out of the backfield at the running back position. So that's always somewhere you could go as well with the Saints offense. Bringing in Clint Kubiak, who could implement that 49er system. I think both of those could also fit.
Yeah, with pick 150, Colorado State edge rusher Muhammad Kamara, a guy that we got to see on the biggest of stage, week 2 of the college football season against Colorado. And one of the guys that actually made a name for himself in that game, I really thought that he got to the passer better than anybody that I've seen in a long time. Yes, it was against a more banged up, not as refined Colorado offensive line, but the guy's ultra athletic, has this great speed step to power hand to inside move. And can we talk about his production?
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned it earlier. He was
54 tackles for loss, 30 sacks on his career, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's impossible to match.
Yeah, I mean, he's a small-town school product, which we know the Saints love. The Saints love athletic, small-time school defensive ends. It's what we go to. I mean, you look at guys like Marcus Davenport. Didn't want to say his name, but we had to. You look at Marcus Davenport. He had a very similar profile to what I think Muhammad Kamara has. Just super athletic, not necessarily the most technically sound, but has all the tools you need to possibly come in there and affect the play on the field in the NFL. Although he went to a small school, he still learned to produce, like you said, with 54 tackles for loss, 30 sacks on his career. I mean, that says a lot about his motor and how willing he is to get into that backfield, how willing he is to play whistle to whistle every snap. Other players to watch here outside the defensive line, we have to talk about quarterback, a guy who I loved going into this past season. a guy who led his team to an undefeated season, although they were left out of the playoffs pretty much because he got hurt. Jordan Travis was in the Heisman watch for a long time. Had a lot of talk earlier in the season about, possibly being a first, second round quarterback. Gets hurt, isn't able to finish out the season, but led a fantastic Florida State team that had a lot of weapons and made them shine as well.
Yeah, and then you have like an interior rusher with Miles Murphy out of UNC. I call him an interior rusher, but he's really a run stopper. A guy that can clog up the middle, compare with Brian Brzee, who's more of a pass rush-oriented defensive tackle, just to get a little bit younger in that defensive tackle room for the Saints. Then you get a guy like Kalen King, corner, Penn State, their number one corner. Long, I believe he's 6'2", outside corner, guy that can play anywhere on the field, in my opinion.
And then finally, Gabriel Murphy played opposite of Leatu Latu in college, a guy who's going to go in the first round. Gabriel Murphy still put up numbers across from Latu. So whenever you can produce across from another first-round talent, just like I said with Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner, Gabriel Murphy and Leatu Latu can be a similar combo. The difference between Murphy and Kamara here is Kamara's more of like work on the technique and figure out his tools because he has everything there, whereas Murphy is very technically sound, but not necessarily the biggest, strongest, fastest guy. Moving back to the offensive side of the ball, a position I said we would talk about and a position I love to talk about because it might be my favorite position to look at. The running back position. Pick number 170, Dillon Johnson out of Washington. Three biggest strengths here for Dillon Johnson. High-level vision, kind of reminiscent of a Alvin Kamara when you think about it that way. Alvin Kamara always sits back, waits, finds the hole, and explodes from the snap, which I think Dillon Johnson is kind of reminiscent of. But I think something he does a little bit different is that short yardage physicality, something that we brought in Jamal Williams to do last season. Didn't necessarily work out in our favor. But if you look at our running back room right now, we have Alvin Kamara and we have Kendre Miller, who are both more elusive, athletic, pass-catching backs, whereas Dillon Johnson can kind of be that short yardage power runner. You saw him doing at Washington with an offense that kind of took over the nation with Michael Penix at quarterback. You had three speedy, physical receivers in Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, and then Dillon Johnson out of the backfield. I mean, just a really talented offense, and he didn't get outshined, really. Like, he was a player that people noticed on the national stage. So when I was doing this mock draft, we see him at 170. He was kind of a staple pick for us for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, Dillon Johnson, powerful runner. Takes more than just an arm to bring him down. You saw that in the national championship game, 2 rushes for 70 yards, both for a touchdown. It's crazy that a guy like this can fall this far, but he was the running back 2 in that offense, and a guy that has incredible upside, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he has a perfect mix of explosiveness and physicality that NFL teams can really look for. Reminiscent for me of a guy like Gus Edwards, who is currently a running back 1 for the Chargers after leaving the Ravens. So if you can get a guy like that at pick 170, you don't pass that up.
Yeah, and other guys to watch here, you still need to address quarterback eventually. So Joe Milton III, low floor, high ceiling guy, in my opinion. Jaheim Bell, tight end from Florida State. Bit on the smaller side for what I like in a tight end, but a great run blocker and just the best you can get here.
Yeah, speaking on Joe Milton just for a second before we move on to some other players to watch, like you said, low floor, high ceiling, has a huge athletic profile because he's big, he's strong, has an arm that can throw the ball 80 yards, is fast, but he didn't quite have the footwork and the technique to be a high-level quarterback in the SEC. Moving on to the NFL, can somebody help him develop? Can somebody teach him, how to be a quarterback rather than just an athlete? Is it possible? Sure. But, late round draft pick, that's when you want to take that high ceiling guy who could always explode onto the scene. Luke McCaffrey is another guy to look at here. If he falls this far, it'll be hard to pass him up. He killed it at the combine. He has obviously NFL blood running through his veins, with his brother Christian being one of the best players in all of football, his dad being a Hall of Fame level wide receiver who won multiple Super Bowls. Mom played sports at Stanford, so he's definitely got NFL pedigree, and also really good player down at Rice. And then Nehemiah Pritchett, a cornerback who I know we both talked about possibly taking here in our mock draft. Cornerback out of Auburn. Really good player. I think he can play slot or outside. And again, I really value schools and competition levels. So when you're playing at Auburn and you have to play against teams like LSU, and you have to play against Alabama and Florida and Georgia and Tennessee, and you have to play against all these really, really good schools, really good receivers, and you can hold your own, that's really important to me. So I think Pritchett's one of those late-round guys that could get a look at corner. Speaking about corner, Dwight McGlothern. LSU fans, you would know him for being a Tiger, but he did transfer to Arkansas for his last 2 seasons. He's a long, athletic outside corner who I think is really good at reading the body language and eyes of a quarterback, and you can see that through his high turnover production, 7 picks over the last 2 seasons. Really good outside guy. I don't necessarily know if he can project as a slot, but if you look at the Saints' needs, our slot's pretty much taken care of with Delonte Taylor. The question mark is always with the health of Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo, who's going to take that rotational spot at the outside. And if we can pick a guy here, and I believe this is the 6th round, to be a rotational corner for us, you can't pass that up.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Dwight McGlothern play at the NFL level in a zone scheme, because he is so good at reading the quarterback's eyes. If you look at his highlight tape, he's always jumping routes. He's taking the undercut almost every time on the receiver. Yes, it's a gamble sometimes, but you see it work out every once in a while, like Diggs with the Cowboys and stuff like that.
Other players to watch here: Jalen Green, edge rusher out of James Madison. You can speak to it because I know you heard you know a little bit more about him than I do. But just high production player, was really, really good last season before getting hurt.
Yeah, he led the nation in tackles for a loss and sacks before getting hurt. I don't know if it was week 6 or maybe a little bit before that. But a guy that tested well at the combine, a guy that a lot of people have on their radar. So seeing him go in this 190-ish range, it just makes a whole lot of sense, even though he's on the smaller side.
And if we choose to pass up on running back earlier in the draft, which I hope we do invest a little bit earlier than this, but Cody Schrader was a guy who absolutely killed it at Mizzou this past season. I know LSU fans remember him for what he did against us. I mean, that was an absolute shootout, and for a shootout to come down to a running back having 2 huge explosive touchdowns on you, I mean, that's crazy to me. And he played really, really well in a tough SEC where Mizzou really showed out this season, and Cody Schrader was a big part of that offense. And then Nathan Thomas, tackle out of University of Louisiana Lafayette.
Yeah, he's 6'5", so I think that he has potential to play inside as well as play tackle. He played, I believe, right tackle at ULL, but really a mauler who is also very good in pass pro. So just an all-around guy that is falling down boards just because of how small of a school he went to.
And we know ULL can produce offensive linemen. Osiris Torrance and Robert Hunt, both starters at the NFL level. Coming down to our last 2 picks here, the first one, pick 199, Joshua Cephas, a guy we just discovered recently, but we're both immediately loving, and you're going to see that with our last pick as well. But he's a tall, lean receiver, very crisp, clean route runner. Just looks smooth on the field. And then he's got reliable hands, only 1 drop this past season, which, you know, I'm going to think every Saints receiver this past season had at least 1, if not more. So to bring in a guy who's tall, runs routes, and can catch the ball, not a lot of downside to that.
Yeah, and being 6'3", he isn't necessarily the fastest, But with how clean his routes are, how reliable his hands are, I could see him getting a little bit of action here or there. A guy I would be comfortable with if one of our guys goes down.
Yep. Again, one of those small town school guys could be passed up because of that. But his tape shows, and he really measures well to be a really good NFL receiver. And then our last pick, my favorite pick of the draft, because it was somebody who we discovered 20 minutes before we started recording, and we were immediately both like, yep, that's him. A guy who we texted in our group chat said, this might be the best 7th-round pick that we've seen. Kenny Logan Jr., safety out of University of Kansas.
Yeah, real ball hawk in the secondary. A guy that will play deeper than the deepest, but once the ball's in the air, he's going to find it. We talk about his short yardage acceleration. Like, even if he's in man with the tight end or slot receiver, a guy that once the ball once the ball's in the air, is going to attack the ball.
He's got closing speed. He attacks the ball, plays a high level of intensity. Just immediately when we watched tape of him, he popped. And, of course, you have to look at more than just the eye test. That's why analytics and stats exist, so you can see what they're actually doing. But when you watch a guy, especially, a guy who you think is going to go a lot later in the draft, maybe even undrafted, going this late, and you're like, wow, that's really impressive. It's a guy who you're willing to take a shot on. And, the Saints lose Marcus May at safety. Tyrann Mathieu getting older. We have a guy like Jonathan Abram who might even start for us. So
Jordan Howden.
Jordan Howden's a very young player who's projecting to be really good. So if you can get another young safety in there and lock up the back of that secondary who is not always healthy and not always reliable, I think that would be really impressive. He kind of plays that Marcus May role, I think, and being your high-intensity, crash-on-the-ball type guy. So if we can find a gem like this, or somebody who I believe will be a gem, like Kenny Logan Jr. out of Kansas, I'd be really excited.
Yeah, guys go undrafted and make teams all the time. Guys go in the late 6th to early 7th all the time and make an impact on NFL rosters. And I think that in the 7th round, in the late 6th, you're really looking for just a little bit of a spark, and that's what we saw in Kenny Logan Jr., and that was enough for us to be sold on him.
Yeah, in the 7th round, obviously it gets hard for people who are not NFL scouts to know who's going to go in that range, but we did our best to kind of outline what the Saints need and who are the really good players that could fill those roles throughout these 7 rounds. Taking in the 1st round a guy like Fashanu, a tackle who is, tackles our number 1 position of need, and we take a really good one who could go in the top 10, or if he falls to us at 14, somebody who we can't pass up. And then addressing other places of need throughout the draft, like wide receiver and corner, running back, defensive line. I think the Saints are well positioned in this draft to make a couple trades, whether it be up or down, to get next year picks, to get higher picks in later rounds, whatever the case may be. I think they've got a lot of draft capital. I think as long as we have a draft plan and we can execute that plan to our highest ability, we could come out of this with a really good draft. Thinking about times like 2017 when we picked 2 rookies of the year and 2 guys who would get close to max contracts for other teams. So really looking forward to the draft. And, it's a little bit over a week away at this point, and I'm really excited to see what the Saints can do. I'm really excited to see what happens league-wide, really. I think it's going to be an exciting time when it comes April 25th. Hopefully the Saints can make us happy, pick a couple of the guys we mentioned. We talked about a lot of different guys, not only who we picked, but other players to watch in that area. So we'll look really, really smart if we turn out with a couple of these dudes. But make sure to tune in next Monday. Next Monday, that is the Monday before Draft Thursday, we will have not just 1, not just 2, not just 3, not just 4, but 5 OTD cast members bringing Mock Draft 5.0 to you. And that one is going to be, us playing the role of GM, switching out picks, what would we do, making trades, but really trying to predict what's going to happen on Thursday. I think that's the biggest piece for us is put on the cap of NFL Scout and see what's gonna break down after next week. So if you enjoyed this content, make sure to check us out on YouTube or Spotify, Off the Dome Sports Podcast. Follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it nowadays. That is _Dome Pod. That's where you'll see all of our updates, tweets about when videos go out, retweets of old videos. Check out the No Network, KNEAUX at Be in the Know. Tons of good content going out over there. If you love Louisiana sports like we do, LSU, Saints, Pels, even nationwide stuff like the NFL, NBA, MLB, even wrestling. So there's tons of good stuff going on over at the No Network. Really excited for the work that we get to do in the future and proud of the work we get to do now. Well, like I said, if you enjoyed it, make sure to check us out, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, and we will see you next time.